Well, hello everyone. My name is Joe Reitz, and I wanted to present my summit session from Marketo Summit 2018. Basically, just wanted to get this out on YouTube. I know there's a lot of people that wanted to attend. There's a lot of other really good sessions that I wanted to attend at the same time as mine, especially Courtney Grimes. My dog is behind me, so you'll probably hear this is going to be a little less formal than, say, at Marketo Summit, but want to go ahead and get this out there just in case it's helpful to you. But please let me know in the comments. So, what I basically said at Summit was, welcome. And I love my job. My role at AWS is I have this really cool opportunity to train Marketo users at AWS how to become marketers. And as cool as that is, and as much as I love my job, you don't care about that. You're here to see how you can profit from our blood, sweat, and tears. And that's what I want to help you do. So for me as a marketer, when I hear someone say 10 awesome things you can learn from XYZ, or 10 Marketo life lessons you can learn from Marketo Enterprise or from a enterprise org, I instantly think to myself, well, maybe like 6 of them are good, and then the other 4 are going to be, a little bit of filler, just to get to that nice clickbaity number 10. But my goal with this session was, what I told people at Summit was, my goal was to make it the most 30 productive minutes you spend here. I'm going to try to trim that here and continue the Q&A online. It's just a little bit different of a format. But the basic format for this presentation is I give a life lesson, give you a basic tip on how we do things or give you the context behind how we do things at AWS, and then try to frame that in ways that are useful for you, that you can take home, take back to your office today, and take credit for. So, as with many awkward conversations, the first 2 words that start this session are use protection. And I'm going to start, when I say use protection, what I mean is you want to have some kind of user governance policy in mind. So we'll talk about this in very fine detail as we go through the deck, but basically every user role and permission set that we have at AWS is earned by more training. But for most users, that's not going to be the case. But what I do think is very critical is that you have 4 basic questions that you ask yourself and ask of your users to make sure you're giving the right levels of permissioning. So first is, who should be allowed to build in Marketo? And that's a very, very important one to get right. In most instances that I've seen as a consultant, I would say 99% of the time, everyone that's in an instance is given admin rights to everything, which is not what you want to do typically. The example I shared at Summit this week was one that I had seen where a very enterprising sales user had all-up access to Marketo, figured out where the operational folder was, figured out how lead routing worked, and then rather than the system token assigned to the lead owner, the lead token to assign to the lead owner, what this person did was he changed that token to his email address. So he was getting alerts for every marketing qualified lead to come through the system, which is great if you're him, but obviously it didn't have the customer's best interest in mind. There was a lot of, there's no way he could follow up with that volume of MQLs, right? And at the end of the day, it really hurt the company because there was all these MQLs that could have been getting followed up on in a timely manner, but weren't. So it's one of the situations of, hey, we learned a valuable lesson here. Hard to be mad at that guy for being that enterprising, but I was just kind of impressed. But case in point, that giving everybody the access to build things doesn't mean they necessarily should have that ability. So question number 2, and on a related note, is who should have the ability to send smart campaigns? So, or deploy a smart campaign. So we'll talk about this in much more detail. I'm not going to go too deep right now. But basically at AWS, what we do is only certain users that have really proven themselves get the ability to launch or schedule smart campaigns. So we even delineate a standard builder from someone that we would call an email bar raiser. But more on that in a minute. Third question here is who should have the ability to delete things in Marketo? This one is kind of important because, so the joke is license to kill. It just sounded kind of final on a slide. But license to delete is just as permanent. As soon as an asset's gone, you can't you lose some data for the audit trail. You can see that it was deleted, but that's about it. But then if you delete a whole program, Marketo even warns you of this, that you're going to lose all of the fine like program attribution and performance metrics and just the stuff you need to be able to report on how are you influence your records through the pipeline, and how does multi-touch attribution work at your company. So if everybody has the ability to delete things, you risk losing some data, basically, is the point. What we do at AWS is we train our users, the new build users who have earned the right to build in Marketo. We instruct them to use archive folders and just create a folder, convert it to archive folder, name it z.archive so it's tucked away nice at the bottom of your program, and just tuck all your old smart lists and unused smart campaigns and emails right in there. That way they're out of the way, you don't need to worry about them, it's obvious that they're not used or referenced by anything, and they can just sit. And then, if you have someone nice that you know or knows you and they come through your program, they could delete those for you. But basically not everyone should have the ability to do that natively. And the fourth point here is very interesting when we start thinking about different opt-in consent legislations like GDPR or CASL or whatever. But the idea of who should have import rights versus export rights. And import is important because not everybody, at absolute best case, you're going to have people trying to import bad dummy data. In absolute worst case, you have people trying to import non-opted in customer data. So let's say, for example, you have an office in France and someone imports a list of leads that we have no idea if they've granted opt-in consent to receive our marketing messages. And then there's a customer complaint. If it gets escalated, you could be in a lot of trouble, especially under something like GDPR or something like that. So import access is very important to control. And one cool thing we do at AWS that I unfortunately don't have time to get into just for the scope of this presentation is all of our list imports and especially like purchase records exist in their own partition and workspace. We call it the prospect database. But basically those records are kind of isolated so that one, no one else can dip into leads you buy. So you buy leads, you own them for a set period of time, and you're the only person that can market to them. And two, it allows us to have kind of a check and balance of, is the data coming into the system good from purchase lists or wherever? Are these all opted in? Do we have the safeguards in place to make sure that we're not somehow importing records we don't have the legal right to communicate with from a marketing perspective? And export access is similarly important because, simply put, once something comes out of the system, you don't know where it goes. So I think we've all experienced or at least heard of situations where somebody downloads data, know they're leaving a company, and they take it with them. I've heard of this happening where someone leaves one company and goes to join a competitor. Obviously a huge security issue. So you really want to keep a tight control over who has access to export things in Marketo, especially in terms of personally identifiable information, or what we would call PII. I think that's all I'm going to say on that one. Pretty common sense. But I started with something so dry as user governance and with that awkward dad joke about using protection, because one, if I set the bar low, you're not going to really demand funny jokes from me. And two, what I really wanted to set the stage for was that training is paramount. And at Summit, I had this whole big joke because our VP, our director, and my boss were all sitting in the front row, and I was like, hey, they're all here, so of course I have a vested interest in telling them that training is important. But it is. And when I think back to my genesis as a Marketo user, it probably took me about 6 months before I felt like I really had my legs beneath me, that I could stand on my own and even run. And that was just using the School of Hard Knocks. So what training does is it helps accelerate you down what I like to call the Marketo marketing automation maturity curve. If you attended my session last year, I think I also mentioned this then, but just to fly through this very quickly, I think of Marketo maturity and your usage of marketing automation in 4 phases, right? So the first phase is the act of desperation. You're a marketer with a CMO that wants to see some kind of goal about you did something with the email channel. So you're basically just putting everybody into a bucket, sending them an email, not really targeting it very finely, just getting that thing out the door. That's phase 1. That's a pretty rudimentary starting point. I think a lot of it, I think all of us started there. So phase 2 then is when you start layering on, instead of just the batch and blast, spray and pray approach, it's more of basic automation. So you're triggering campaigns, something you're adding in behavioral data. These might be drip nurtures, they might be just like a triggered confirmation campaign or something like that. Or if you do something, browse this part of the website and interact with this content, you get put into this stream kind of thing. But more strategic, but still not quite to the level of what I like to call phase 3, advanced lifecycle marketing. And this is where you've taken stock of all of your marketing assets, and you've basically you understand where each thing fits for each stage of the buyer's journey. So at this stage, the key hallmark is you are sending the right message to the right people at the right time to deliver the right results. So one of the best ways I've seen this done is at a former client. We had it basically set up where there's top of funnel content, and then based on lead score and interactivity with that stream of content, they would move to a middle of funnel content. So the same awareness, consideration, and action buying kind of model that you always hear about. Very marketing 101, but if it ain't broke. So we drive awareness at top of funnel. We get them to consider what's special about my product offering, what's special about what I'm going to do for you as a solution, and then the action of when they get added to an opportunity or become an SQL or whatever the trigger is to give them the bottom of funnel content. You're making sure you're pushing them further and further into the buying process as they go along, so that by the end of it, they're just nodding their head like, "Oh yeah, that's a good point. I should get this product or this solution to help me fix my need." And then phase 4 is we'll just call it multi-channel integrated strategy. But what this really is kind of like, this is where all the buzzwords live. So like last year it was like ABM, now it's like machine learning and all these other fun shenanigans. If you were at Summit, I'm sure you talked to a lot of vendors downstairs that had a lot of really cool ideas, really cool products. The reality is, I think, that we all at best live in stage 3.5 when we're like living our best life, because phase 4 is kind of always a moving target, and you don't always have budget to do all those things anyway. So case in point, training helps you move down this quicker. So you might even curtail phase 1 and 2 off of the curve entirely and just instantly move to phase 3 much faster than you would have before. So at AWS, what we do is, this is not important because until you are joining AWS, which I also made a plug during Summit to say we're hiring. So if you're looking for a job, you find something on our job site that suits your fancy, send me a quick note. I want to definitely plug you into the right people. So if it's a good fit, we want to put you up in those roles because we have I love our team. But basically, until you join AWS, you won't experience any of these trainings. But basically, the point I want to make here is that there's 3 paths. Basically, there's when you become a new user, we give you all the basic Marketo jargon, like how this thing works, what it is, what's unique about how AWS uses Marketo, and really helping you understand everything you need to know to build campaigns and get them out the door. But not just in the basic sense of phase 1. Like, let's move on and target very finely, because the finer we have our targeting, the more we see our benchmarks increase. So after you complete new user training, you're given standard build access to the appropriate places in Marketo. So all of our workspaces and partitions are really controlled by geo. So North America, APAC, EMEA, and what have you. Once you pass new user training, you enter into a ongoing path of certified user training. So like you're an existing user, there's other stuff that wasn't covered in new user training, like how to build landing pages or how to build engagement programs. These are things that are a little more sophisticated, but and merited having their own one-off focused training. So if you complete those, you can get more permissions at AWS. So again, everything you do, every permission you need within our Marketo instance, you have to earn through training and proving yourself. And then the third thing I can count is the EBR training path. So when I say EBR, that is the international symbol for email bar raiser. And EBRs are essentially the highest caliber of marketer at AWS. So we'll talk about, we have 700 users. 43 of them are EBRs. And not to say that the other 650 40, whatever, 8, 60, whatever, are not high quality, high caliber marketers, but we demand a very high bar and a very long training path to get people there. So we have a lot of people in that queue. But this is more looking at like, as we'll talk about in the QA process and things like that. But again, none of this matters until or unless you join our team. But the tips that I gave everybody that came to the session was basically, I do have 4 ways you can get training. So the first one is Marketo University. So if you go to marketo.com/education/training, what you can do is there's a bunch of free trainings here, little video trainings that walk you through core concepts, so you can understand what Marketo is from a theoretical standpoint and the value it's going to deliver. You probably watched some of these as Marketo was selling you on, hey, we're the right platform for you. But there's also some paid training available as well. And Marketo will do workshops. Marketo Pro Services will do workshops too. So give those a shot if those are something you're interested in. The other place to go, if you're really looking to go down the school of hard knocks, is go to docs, D-O-C-S, not D-O-C-K-S, docs.marketo.com. That's all of Marketo's original documentation. And I hear that it's going to be updated very soon. So definitely a good place to learn. And if you ever run into questions, that's a good first place to look of like, hey, how does this thing actually work? Option 2. Some nerd, not going to name names, did a 40-part YouTube series called Marketo Foo. And you can find this series at youtube.com/JoeWrightsMarketing. I will say, so I built all these as a consultant. One of the questions that came up during Summit's QA was, when are you going to do more, Joe? And the answer is soon. I'm just working out a few of the logistics with the sandbox I need to do this in from a security perspective and like trying to figure out work-life kind of questions surrounding it. But yeah, I'm very excited. So definitely hit me up with your comments, your questions, the things you want to see, the things you want to learn, because I will be making more of these and they're going to be better and better and better. So youtube.com/JoeWrightsMarketing, there's beginner and advanced level courses. So if you ever want to learn how to make a user role of permission, or if you want to know how to do line breaks in a text area field, all that kind of stuff is covered, or building an RCM. The core tenet of marketing automation is anything you have to do more than once, you shouldn't have to do more than once. And as a lazy consultant that wasn't willing to burn client hours on things that I thought people should be able to figure out for themselves, that's what Marketo Foo was born of. But now, I'm not making any money off I should say, I'm making about $100 a year off these. So I might retire soon. Maybe if you go click a few ads. There will be more Marketo Foo, was my point. Option 3 is find an agency partner. So if you had the good fortune of being at Marketo Summit last year, I hope that you talked to one of these 4. I worked at Fathom. None of these were mentioning me, paying me, compensating me to mention their logo. But I've worked with people that have either been alumni of these organizations or are currently working there, can vet for the quality and their understanding and expertise in Marketo. They're all LaunchPoint partners. So what these can help you do, what any agency can help you do, is they could help you do a training workshop and actually have a classroom where your whole team gets trained. They could help you build a center of excellence where they just build your clonable template library for you, and then you just go off to the races and build everything in your instance based on how they help you set it up. So it's a great way to accelerate your learning as well. The other things they can do for you is partner with you on execution. So if you don't have the budget or the ability, or you just can't find any good talent in your area, partnering with an agency is a great way to augment smaller teams with, let's call it scalable headcount, for lack of a better term. And then the 4th tip is basically you could reference the Marketo community. So obvious caveat here, this is crowdsourced information, so just remember your mileage is going to vary. And it's going to be and I say that because it's going to be very use case agnostic feedback that you get on the community, because not everybody knows the little eccentricities or any custom fields or anything like that you have in your instance. But I would say, as you're asking questions, be as specific as possible. If you have a question, especially talking about HTML or CSS, drop it into the comment so that we actually know what you're looking at. And there are a number of users, Sanford Whiteman being one of the most well-known, that will comment very quickly and can deliver very, very awesome help. So Marketo community is found at nation.marketo.com. Okay, so the simple idea here is that if there's anything worth showing to your customer, if it's worth doing, it's worth another round of QA or quality assurance, if that wasn't apparent. But we handle QA in kind of a peculiar way at AWS. Amazon really prides itself on being a peculiar company. But basically no one from 5-year Marketo certified expert and any level of expertise on down to brand new Marketo neophyte, I don't even know what purple is, kind of Marketo user. We always have a third party QA anything we build. So nothing that a user at AWS builds is self-deployed, if that makes sense. So let's talk about the basic process there. So the first thing, like any other company, so it's pretty normal. So define goals and strategy, what KPIs do we need for this campaign to be successful, and then it's either passed off to someone with that's trained and has the ability to build in Marketo, or the person that defined the campaign brief is going to do the building themselves. So the campaign brief would have everything from images required to headline, pre-header, subject line, body copy, CTA links. All that's in the phase of the goal and strategy being defined on the design brief. Campaign is then built to order, basically, by someone who knows what they're doing. And this is the part that a lot of companies don't have a formal process around. After the campaign is built, it's passed to an email bar raiser for review. This email bar raiser then looks at it and basically asks the question, is this email worthy of our customers? Which is a little fuzzy to define, but the basic guideline that we tell our EBRs, we call them EBRs, is this email better than half the emails that you've seen in the recent past? And if the answer is no, then they provide their feedback back to the campaign builder to get it over the bar. And if the answer is yes, they simply schedule and deploy it in accordance to the campaign builder's target date. And that's essentially it. But the question then becomes, how do you become an EBR? So the slide, I could have updated it now that I'm at home, but I did not, is about 2 months old. And the numbers have since changed. We have 705 Marketo users as of right now, and only about 43 of those have become EBRs, exactly 43. And the EBR training path is very long. Typically, we require someone to use Marketo at AWS for 6 months before even entering the path. And then it's usually an average of 3 months to complete it, because once you're in the EBR training path, what you have to do is you have to show me 10 campaigns you've built during that 6-month period. So I have to actually look at them and say, yep, they didn't screw this up. This is a pretty good campaign, rock solid, knows what they're doing, good builder. The idea being, if you can build it, you can QA it. Then they take a classroom course with yours truly, where I basically say all of the best practices and latest gotchas of things they've got to look for. And there's a lot of hands-on kind of exercises that go with that. So truly vetting out that if you finish my class, you are a power user of the platform. But it doesn't stop there, because then they have to pass a written exam, which is fun. About 62 questions on all things email best practices, not even just Marketo, but just email channel best practices. And then it doesn't stop. After they pass the written exam, then I give them a complex scenario that basically just says, here, you want to target these people using this product that have this color hair in these countries, and go. And I basically watch them build something right in front of me, so that I can see that, okay, you might have the theoretical knowledge, but do you have the tactical knowledge as well? So it's a really, really high bar. And then after that, they also then have to do some passive learning and watch a few other EBRs doing their thing, because as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another, and or woman, or then after they shadow an EBR, they then have to basically have their training wheels on, so that they we call them pre-EBRs, but what these are is basically they do a full EBR before a certified EBR checks their work. And in a perfect world, when the certified EBR comes around, there's nothing to correct. The pre-EBR has caught everything. So that's why it takes an average of about 3 months to complete the learning path, even once you're in it, and why there's only 43 of us at AWS. So, not saying you have to have that at all at your organization. It's a very long, drawn-out process. We can do things like that because we have such a big infrastructure and scale. But the simple point is, what you should have, absolutely, is some kind of official QA process. I think the thing to take away from this session, if nothing else, is that anything you build needs to be QA'd by someone else, bar none. I'll give you a very self-deprecating example in a little bit of something bad that I did years ago that proves the point. Okay, so the next point is very quick and simple, just outsourcing trench work to focus on scale. I personally derive a lot of satisfaction from working with CSS and HTML. However, I realized very quickly in my career that there was a very low ceiling on where that was going to get me from a salary position. And then also, it wasn't always in the best interest of the business for me to focus on those tactical things when I could be more strategic with my time. So what I would encourage you guys to all do is, similar to what we do, is we partner with Email Monks or Grazidi or other agencies like this that have very fast, cost-effective turnarounds. So basically, if you're building email or landing page templates, I'm not going to commit these guys to a price, especially being recorded online, but the turnaround is generally as fast as overnight, and it's pretty budget-friendly, less than a couple $100s for a pretty big project, in my opinion. It's gotten to the point that now I am letting my HTML and CSS skills languish because these, especially Email Monks, understands Marketo syntax so well for 2.0 emails and guided landing page templates. There's no reason for me to do it when they can just do it faster, and I can provide them some feedback and iterate on it over the course of a day or two and hit it pretty quickly. The next point is one of the most interesting and important ones of we all work at human companies, right? So we need to have the understanding that humans are going to human. We're going to make mistakes. And this is the fearless marketer component of the presentation, where I say the thing to do in those situations is to lean in. The thing that makes a fearless marketer fearless is just that simple idea of leaning in at all times. So, that's just my opinion, getting off my soapbox. What we have at Amazon is what we call the correction of error report. So it's very simple to understand at its core root. So very simply, it's a report where you write something goes wrong. You say, what happened? What was the circumstances for that thing happening? And then the critical part, what are you going to do to make sure it never happens again? Enter self-deprecating story. So this happened before I was at AWS, before I was at Amazon. But years ago, if I was, this would be the COE I would have had to have written. Years ago, I was just building an event campaign for a steak dinner. So like we had a trade show, we had a dinner that night. The idea was just to invite attendees of that show and any other customers within a certain geographic radius to come attend the event. So, and come to dinner. There was a few of us working in the program, building over each other, layering in filters, trying to get this thing out the door quickly because, hey, if you have more cooks in the kitchen, you can cook faster, right? No. So, you see where this is going. As filters were being added, the advanced filter logic was not being updated properly. And there was one filter at the end that was an or that should have been an and. You really see where this is going now. So when we got the feedback that the campaign was good to go, what the miscommunication was that the email was good to go. The Smart campaign obviously was not, because I simply went in to the schedule tab, hit run now, go. What ended up happening, I can feel the internet wincing. What ended up happening was, instead of going to 9,000 people, it went to about 240,000. And I will never forget this because my dear friend Andy Kemp tweeted a link to me saying of the email saying, "Hey man, thanks for inviting me to steak dinner." The dinner was in Dallas. She lives in St. Louis. There's about 1,000 miles in between those two cities. So obviously I goofed up. So if this was a correction of error report, what it would have been was, basically the whole situation that I told you, right? So that's what happened. It happened because we had too many cooks in the kitchen, and we didn't have a QA process. We were just moving too fast and not checking our work. So how will it never happen again? Very simple. We're going to have a QA process. There's only going to be one builder dedicated to a campaign and one reviewer dedicated to that campaign, and no one who built will launch the thing that they built. Similar thing to what we have in Amazon, right? Then I will always review the advanced filter logic and make sure that it looks correct. When I go to the schedule tab, I'll always make sure that the audience count runs and looks right, and I will never schedule anything until I have verified that fact. And point number 3 is that I don't even know if it was point number. It felt like a point number 3. The last point is I will schedule something. I'm never going to hit run now. I'm always going to hit 30 minutes later, just so I can give everything one last look. Because if error teaches me anything, it teaches me to be a little bit neurotic about never screwing up again. So again, fearless marketer thing here is totally owned up to the responsibility of I screwed this up, leaned into the fix, and developed a policy and a framework that took a situation that could have burned trust with leadership in that particular company into one that instead earned it, because all these things happen, but here's what we're doing to fix it, and here's how it's never going to happen again. It's a very, very powerful way to change something from negative to positive, and just my general career advice for any of you guys that have made it this far into the presentation. Okay, so the rest go pretty quick here. So this point, I think point 7, is put your audience first. And this idea at AWS, you might have heard of customer obsession at Amazon is a big thing. And we have 3 key ways we do this. So the first is we use something called 3-day governance, which is a simple idea that if we send you a marketing email today, we're not going to send you another one for another 3 consecutive days. This is a layer on top of our communication limits, which say you can only get 1 email per day and no more than 3 per week. But just from our own unsubscribed data, we know that getting an email Monday, Tuesday, and again on Wednesday is not a great customer experience. It gives the perception that we're sending too many emails. So what we do instead is add a smart list to all of our campaigns. That's basically a block list saying if you've got an email in the last 3 days, you're on it. So we're only going to target records that are not on that block list. In addition to the 3-day governance, we also have what we call a 180-day block. And this is basically if you haven't engaged with us, engaged with our emails, engaged with our website, or done used any AWS product or service, or anything else that we can see and measure based on Munchkin, we're going to assume that you don't want to hear from us, and that's okay. Like, we'll let you initiate again and you'll come off that block list, but it's just one customer obsessed thing we do to not flood your inbox. And point number 3, which everyone should be doing, is honoring communication preferences. So obviously this includes unsubscribed data, right? But also in our preference center, we also have 7 different types of communications you can opt into or out of. So for me personally, I love getting event invites. I hate getting newsletters. So I have that option to say all of our campaign targeting for like a newsletter, all those 7 different fields are included in each different type of program template. So we will never send a type of email to someone who doesn't want it. So I would encourage you guys to adopt a similar stance. Just be really obsessed with the kinds of emails that you're putting in front of your customers, because this pays in dividends. And if you get this right, you'll never have to. It's kind of like one of those things of, if you take care of your customers first, everything else just falls into place. I'm a big believer in that, and I think that's just you need to start with your customer and work backwards from there. So simple point, hard to execute. The next thing that I would recommend is, especially on the point of 3-day governance, is that you need to prioritize your sends. So what this means is we meet weekly at AWS to basically look through all the campaigns that are going out over the next 2 weeks to say, where's the overlap? Because you can see very clearly on the slide that the 3-day gov block is kind of rolling. And then is there targeting overlap between these? How much audience is going to be pulled from one campaign into another? And does it make sense to then, instead of sending a campaign, if you got one of 300,000, if the targeting is the same as the campaign with 25,000 and it's going out earlier, should we just put a cross promo banner into the first bigger email and then not send 2 emails so we can kind of consolidate the channel that way? We have a lot of different things that we do that go into email prioritization. So we know based on activity and benchmark data of like events are perceived as more valuable and relevant than newsletters. Not to pick on newsletters, but just a simple example without the data in front of me. But prioritizing our sends helps us do that. And by doing this kind of thing and being customer obsessed and everything we've covered till now and really raising the bar on all of our emails, our benchmarks are about double what the industry standards are. Our open rates are like 30% and our click rates are insanely high. Our unsubscribes are really low, and it's because of this attention to detail through the whole process that happens. So I got this piece of advice when I was in the Marines. So it also applies on the dance floor for those of you that were at the gala. But if it doesn't look cool, you're probably doing it wrong. Very true. But what I mean for this in context of Marketo is basically you need to have a library of clonable templates. And this makes sure that everything that you build comes from something that is standardized and is built right. So this ensures that you never forget anything in your programs. It's pretty common sense. You can tokenize these for scalability. If you guys, there's another video on my channel you could see about the game of clones when I presented at Summit a few years ago. Very, very easy way to take something that might take hours to build and make it minutes. I think what I shared back then was a program that took over an hour to build, like an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes, was compressed down to about 17 minutes with tokens. You can also make these templates very modular and not need to have any HTML or CSS expertise, which is particularly useful if you have teams that don't have those skill sets. And again, reaching out to someone like Grazidi or Email Monks can help with that. But more than anything, these program templates are easily trainable and repeatable. It's very easy for someone just to go back and clone the right campaign every time, and it's got all the assets they need, and then they just need to add in content. Makes it very quick and easy, makes marketers not have to think so much. Okay. I also say any internal resources you have, definitely use make them easy to access. So I had a client in the past, recent Revy winner, that basically for their MSI campaigns, what they would do is they had a series of landing pages that their sales reps could see what the email was, who the intended audience was, and basically just add people to the campaign very easily through that interface, just by filling out a short form. So whatever internal resources you have, or basically anything, if it doesn't look cool, make it look cool, because you're probably doing it wrong, making it hard on your users. And if it's not, whether your customers are internal or external, if it doesn't have that level of customer obsession, there's a way to improve it. So, getting off the soapbox. So, kind of in the lightning rounds, but basically here, the idea of giving credit where credit is due. You can imagine how, with 43 EBRs, 700 marketers building in Marketo, we launched about, I think last year it was like 10,000 programs in a year. It can be a lot. So basically what we do is we incentivize our EBRs, and we create this culture around them where we give credit where credit is due. So the way this works is every time you review an asset, you get a point. And like there's a lead scoring field in the background that I manage and try to award points for fun little things and swag. But also, we do a couple internal awards around these things. So who volunteers the most frequently just to give their time voluntarily versus who has resolved the most overall tickets. What teams are doing the most campaigns, and it creates an atmosphere of recognition and how do I want to say this? It makes people want to become EBRs, right? So gamifying it is a fun way to kind of keep people engaged and take something that's part of their job that they have to do and make it a little fun. So definitely encourage you. Marketo does this with Purple Select. I would encourage you to find some way to make that work in your business as well. And the final tip, which is very quick, is simply to vet your integrations. So what we mean here is anytime you're working with a new vendor, you need to ask a few questions. One, you're going to ask them to speak with the customer, because any vendor worth their salt is going to have a good customer referral they can point you to that will be willing to spend 15, 30 minutes of their time just to talk you through some things. But the most important questions you should ask is, was the integration as easy as advertised? And did you experience anything post-integration that you weren't expecting? Like any random thing come up, like the client just the API keeps disconnecting or messing with your programs? Near and dear to my heart is, how did you onboard your users? What kind of training materials were required, or what was provided? And just trying to build a sense of, like, is this company as good as they're saying they are, or are there other things under the surface that we need to potentially dig into? So that was very fast. Those were 10 life lessons you can learn from an enterprise org. If you have any questions, I would love to see them in the comments. We'll be happy to answer them, potentially talk about them more on a Marketo Foo video, or anything like that. But thank you for staying with me for 41 minutes. This actually was a little bit longer than the session at Summit. But yeah, look forward to seeing more of you guys around here over the course of the year. Thanks.